Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the fourth episode of Death Row Executions. So far, all of the stories on this channel have been on men executed, and today's episode will feature our first female, Barbara Graham, aka Bloody Babs, who was also the third woman in California to be executed by gas. This story gained so much recognition and notoriety that they made a movie about it, and the lead actress actually won an Oscar for it. Bloody Babs seems like a cool nickname, so I'm just going to stick with that for this episode. So Bloody Babs was born on June 26, 1923 in Oakland, California. Unfortunately, this is yet another person executed on death row who seemed doomed from birth and had a tough upbringing. Her mother, Hortense, was an immigrant from Portugal and lived her life as a teenage prostitute. In 1925, Hortense gave birth to a girl named Claire, and in 1930, a son named Joseph. The father of the later two children died in 1930 when Joseph was born. When Babs was just 2 years old, her mother got busted for prostituting, and since she was underage, was sent to a reform school for girls. Babs was said to have been raised by strangers and extended family members. She was very intelligent, but lacked formal education. When she was just a teenager, Babs was homeless and made a living begging for money and lived in the streets, which she was eventually arrested for because she looked and was later found out to have been underage. She was sentenced to serve her time at Ventura State School for Girls, which is the same school her mother had actually been sentenced to. I feel a little bit bad that after her mother was arrested for prostitution, the state did not do a better job placing her in a loving home with people who actually wanted to be parents. It's crazy how immediately after, she was randomly taken care of by a plethora of different people / strangers. In 1939, at the age of 16, Babs was released from the reform school and attempted to start a new life for herself. She began dating a U.S. Coast Guard by the name of Harry Kilhammer in 1939, and by 1940 they married. And yes, she was still underage. Babs had 2 children with Harry, but in 1942, at the age of 19, they divorced. It has not been mentioned why, but Harry was able to get full custody of both children. Within the next few years, she married 2 more times, but each marriage ended in yet another divorce. Things weren't going too well for Babs, and it seemed as if it was just one bad event after another. She ended up giving up with the relationships and honest work and began prostituting just like her mother did. There is an old term called Seagull Circles or Seagull, and it was when a group of prostitutes hung out near naval bases. This is what Babs used to do and would frequent the Oakland Army Base, Oakland Naval Supply Depot, and Alameda Naval Air Station. Babs was arrested a few times for her sex work, and it was reported she had one arrest in 1942, which crosses timelines of when she was with her first husband, so I can only speculate that she was prostituting while married to all 3 of her husbands as a late teen. At the age of 22, she began working in San Francisco in a brothel. She was well liked because of her red hair and sex appeal. Her brothel madam was Sally Stanford. Her real name was Mabel Bubsey. Here are a few pictures of Madam, aka Pimp Sally Stanford. Babs obviously continued her downward spiral and got involved in drugs, gambling, and making friends with criminals and ex-convicts. She once served a 5-year prison sentence at California Women's State Prison for lying under oath when she testified as a false witness for her ex-convict friend. After serving her time for perjury, she moved to Nevada and then back to Southern California. Unfortunately, she got a place on Hollywood Boulevard and began prostituting again. In 1953, at the age of 30, Babs married a man by the name of Henry Graham. Babs met Henry at a bar he used to work at, which was also where she met a lot of her Johns. And despite her work, Babs and Henry ended up having a baby boy named Tommy together. Henry probably didn't mind her work because he was an addict himself and was known for being a criminal. It was actually because of Henry, Babs met his two friends, Jack Santo and Emmett Perkins. Babs began to have an affair with Emmett Perkins, and he ended up telling Babs about a 64-year-old widow named Mabel Monahan, who was known to keep large amounts of cash and jewelry in her Burbank, California home. Mabel's nephew worked in Vegas at casinos, and Babs assumed he and Mabel were laundering money from the gambling tables. On the evening of March 9, 1953, Babs, Perkins, Santo, and a couple other men went to Mabel's home in order to rob it. Babs was able to get inside by asking Mabel if she could use her phone. Once Mabel let Babs in, the other men barged in while one waited outside to be the lookout. Once inside, they all continuously demanded Mabel show them where the jewels and money were, but no matter what, Mabel refused to give or show them anything. Because of Mabel's continued refusal, Babs began to beat her viciously with a pistol, which ended up cracking her skull. As if her deathly beating wasn't enough, Babs then suffocated her to death with a pillowcase. That is how this beautiful, innocent-looking murderer got her name, Bloody Babs. After the murder, one of the men who was there, by the name of Baxter Shorter, ran to the nearest gas station and found a payphone to call the operator. Baxter gave the operator the address, 1718 Parkside Drive, and then immediately hung up before being asked any pressing questions. The operators tried to send help to that address, but it did not exist in Los Angeles. Baxter forgot to mention the city was in Burbank. Unfortunately, Mabel's body was not found until 2 days later when her gardener came to pick up his paycheck and saw the bloody mess. Sadly, just like my last video, the robbery was a complete fail because they left with absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing. The dodo birds learned at a later date there were over $15,000 in jewelry and other valuable items right near Mabel's dead body, and it was stashed in a purse out of all places. It makes me think if they were strung on some drugs, because these criminals definitely were not smart and ended up testifying on one another later as well. Baxter Shorter was arrested a while later on a different charge. When he got caught for his new crime, he started yapping away about the robbery and murder of Mabel Monahan. There could have easily been a dirty cop involved in his testimony because his statement was eventually leaked and he got kidnapped by Perkins and Santo. After kidnapping Shorter, they murdered him. Pictured here is Baxter's wife, who witnessed the kidnapping and was able to identify Perkins and Santo as the ones who did it. Cops found the car Baxter was kidnapped in, and it was at the same location Perkins, Santo, and Babs were apprehended. The car was also registered under Santo's girlfriend's name. Unfortunately, Baxter's body was never found, and they legally declared him dead in 1960. In court, Babs continuously expressed her innocence despite a few witnesses testifying against her. All witnesses were testifying for immunity, so I'm not too sure how reliable the testimonies were. Babs also had no alibi, and she really shot her own self in the foot by paying a fellow inmate $25,000 for her friend to give a false alibi on her behalf. Sadly for Babs, the inmate who told her about this friend was really a police officer, and the inmate was working to reduce her sentence. The inmate ultimately got released from jail immediately, and her sentence was changed to time served. During trial, when they questioned Babs on her actions, it has been quoted that she made these statements. "Oh, have you ever been desperate? Do you know what it means not to know what to do?" Now, some people think that it was Emmett Perkins who actually beat Mabel, and Babs just put the pillowcase over her head and suffocated her. Regardless of who did what, Babs was still there at the scene of the crime and witnessed the murder and did nothing to contact any type of authority like Baxter did. I would like to know what you guys think. Innocent or not? She, of course, was convicted and sentenced to death row along with Santo and Perkins. In court, Babs cried out, "I am innocent of this crime. I swear to God I am innocent. I hope my baby drops dead if I did it." On June 2nd, 1955, Babs had a last meal of a milkshake and a hot fudge sundae. She was scheduled to be executed at 10 a.m., but wasn't strapped in until around 11:30 due to her lawyer trying to stop the execution from happening. Within that hour, the governor called 4 times, either saying the execution was a go or to hold off. Each time that happened, Babs would cry out and even collapsed once. While being strapped in, Babs begged for a blindfold and was given a sleep mask. She has been the only person to ever ask for a blindfold during a gas chamber execution. Babs' last words were, "The good people are always so sure that they're right." Babs was pronounced dead 10 minutes later, around 11:40 a.m. Santo and Perkins were also executed that same day as well. And if you want to look more into her story, check out the 1958 film I Want to Live, in which Susan Hayward portrayed Barbara Graham, aka Bloody Babs, and won an Academy Award for Best Actress. They do exaggerate a little bit in this movie, but it's still a good movie. And I would like to say thank you guys if you made it this far. Please give a like and subscribe and grow with me. I really appreciate the views. Have a good one. Bye-bye.